Thomas McKenna's calloused hands trembled as he signed the marriage certificate, the ink still wet while immigration officers waited outside the courthouse door. The Chinese woman beside him, barely 20, with desperate eyes that held secrets deeper than mountain caves, clutched a small silk pouch that seemed to weigh more than her entire future. In 3 hours, the westbound train would either carry her to deportation or she would become Mrs. McKenna, bound to a stranger's failing ranch in the shadow of the Sierra Nevada. I thought I was just saving a life that October morning in 1887. Hell, I figured marrying Li Wei was the Christian thing to do. She'd be shipped back to China to face God knows what, and I needed help on the ranch anyway. What I didn't expect was the way she kept that silk pouch closer than a gun, or how her eyes would scan the horizon like she was waiting for death to ride in from the east. I sure as hell didn't expect what I'd find hidden in my own barn 3 days later, or the men with rifles who'd come looking for it. Subscribe to the channel because we create only stories that are truly worth your time, and your subscription ensures you won't miss any. Comment where you watch us from. The courthouse steps creaked under my worn boots as I helped Li Wei down, her hand barely touching mine like she was afraid of burning herself on rough skin. 3 hours married, and we hadn't spoken more than 10 words that weren't part of the ceremony. The immigration officer had tipped his hat and ridden back towards Sacramento, and now it was just me, my new wife, and the longest wagon ride of my life back to the ranch. "You don't have to be afraid," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as we rolled past the scattered pines. "I know this isn't what either of us planned." She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something flicker behind those dark eyes, not gratitude, but calculation, like she was measuring me for something I couldn't understand. "You are a kind man, Thomas McKenna," she said, her English careful and precise. "But kindness can be a dangerous thing." I laughed, though it came out bitter. "Lady, look around. This ranch is hanging on by a thread. I've got creditors circling like buzzards, and my nearest neighbor is 10 miles away. The only danger here is dying of loneliness or going broke, probably both." She didn't laugh. Instead, she clutched that silk pouch tighter and turned to stare at the mountains, rising like jagged teeth against the sky. The McKenna Ranch wasn't much to look at. A weathered cabin, a barn that leaked in 3 places, and about 100 acres of stubborn soil that grew more rocks than crops. But it was mine, bought with my father's blood money after he died in a mining accident, and I'd be damned if I'd lose it to the bank. "It is quiet," Li Wei said as we pulled up to the cabin. "Quiet's all I got to offer," I replied, climbing down to help her with her single carpet bag, the only possession she'd brought besides that mysterious pouch. "That and 3 meals a day, if you can call salt pork and beans a meal." Inside, she moved through the cabin like she was memorizing it, every corner, every window, every way in or out. When she saw the rifle hanging above the fireplace, she stopped completely. "You know how to use that?" she asked. "Been shooting since I was knee-high to a grasshopper." "Why?" She turned away without answering, but I caught something in her voice, something that made my skin crawl. In China, my father always said, "A man who shows his weapons is either fool or very smart." I cannot yet tell which you are. That first night, she insisted on sleeping in the barn, said she didn't want to impose, that she needed time to adjust. I didn't argue. Hell, truth was, I was grateful. Having a woman in the house, even a wife in name only, felt stranger than I'd expected, but around midnight I heard her moving around out there, not settling in for sleep, moving. Like she was doing something important, something secret. I pulled on my boots and crept toward the barn, keeping to the shadows. Through a gap in the boards, I could see her in the moonlight, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Li Wei wasn't unpacking her things. She was digging. Her hands worked frantically in the dirt floor of the barn, her silk dress torn and muddy, that precious pouch open beside her, and spilling out of it. Christ almighty. Gold coins. More gold than I'd ever seen in my life. Chinese coins, American eagles, Spanish pieces, a fortune that could buy half the county. But it wasn't the gold that froze my blood. It was the way she kept looking over her shoulder, the way her hands shook as she buried it, the way she whispered words in Chinese that sounded like prayers or curses. This wasn't a woman hiding dowry money. This was a woman burying evidence. I backed away from the barn, my heart hammering against my ribs. What had I gotten myself into? Who was Li Wei really, and what kind of hell had she brought to my doorstep? As I reached the cabin, I heard something that made every hair on my neck stand up, the distant sound of horses riding hard through the night, coming closer. Li Wei heard them too. Through the barn walls, I could see her freeze like a rabbit caught in torchlight. Then she was moving again, faster now, desperate to finish burying whatever secret she'd brought to my land. The horses were getting closer. The riders came at dawn. 3 men in dark coats who sat their horses like they'd been born in the saddle, professional men, the kind who got paid to solve problems permanently. I met them at the porch with my rifle in my hands, trying to look like a man who belonged on his own land, instead of a farmer who'd married a stranger 12 hours ago. Thomas McKenna? The leader was a lean man with dead eyes and a voice like gravel. A jagged scar ran from his ear to his jaw, the kind you get from a knife that barely missed your throat. That's me. You boys lost? Looking for a Chinese woman, about 20 years old, traveling alone. Heard she might have passed through Sacramento yesterday. His horse stepped closer, and I could see the butt of a Colt revolver beneath his coat. Name of Li Wei Chen. My blood turned to ice water. She'd lied about her name too. Don't know any Chinese women, I said, keeping my voice steady. Nearest neighbors are the Hendersons, 10 miles south. The scarred man smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. That's interesting, McKenna, because the marriage records in Sacramento say you wed a Li Wei yesterday afternoon. You calling the courthouse clerk a liar? Through the cabin window I caught a glimpse of movement. Li Wei, or whoever she really was, had heard every word. She was pressed against the wall beside the window, and in her hands was a pistol I'd never seen before, a small, elegant thing that looked like it had seen plenty of use. Marriage records are public information, I said, buying time while my mind raced. What's your interest in my wife? Let's just say she took something that doesn't belong to her. The scarred man's companion, a thick-set brute with arms like tree trunks, spat tobacco juice into my dirt yard. Something her family wants back real bad. Her family? I kept the rifle ready, but tried to sound confused rather than hostile. She's an orphan, told me herself. All 3 men laughed, but there was no humor in it. Orphan? The scarred man leaned forward in his saddle. McKenna, your wife is Li Wei Chen, eldest daughter of Chen Wei Ming, richest merchant in San Francisco's Chinatown. She was supposed to marry a business partner of her father's 2 weeks ago. Instead, she disappeared the night before the wedding, along with her dowry. His eyes glittered with malice. $50,000 in gold, McKenna, enough to buy a dozen spreads like this one. My knees nearly buckled. $50,000. No wonder she'd been so careful with that pouch. Even if that were true, I managed. She's my wife now, legally married. What's between a man and his wife is nobody else's business. The third rider, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. See, that's where you're wrong, farmer. Li Wei belongs to the Tong now. Her father made promises, took payments. When a Chinese daughter runs from her obligations, he shrugged, well, let's just say the Tong has ways of collecting debts. The Tong? The word hit me like a physical blow. I'd heard stories, Chinese criminal organizations that controlled everything from opium to prostitution in the big cities. They didn't make idle threats. Give us the girl and the gold, McKenna, and you can go back to your simple life. Refuse? The scarred man's hand drifted toward his gun. Well, accidents happen on remote ranches, fires, Indian raids, all sorts of tragic things. Inside the cabin, I heard the soft creak of floorboards. Li Wei was moving, getting into position. Whatever she was planning, I had to trust her. But first, I needed to know the truth. And if she doesn't want to go, what she wants stopped mattering the day she stole from the Chen family. The scarred man pulled his revolver halfway from its holster. "You've got until sunset, McKenna. Produce the girl and the gold, or we'll tear this place apart board by board until we find them." They wheeled their horses and rode toward the tree line, but I knew they weren't leaving. They'd be watching, waiting, planning. I lowered my rifle and walked into the cabin, where Li Wei stood with her back to the wall, that small pistol still in her hands. Up close, I could see it was beautifully made, mother-of-pearl handle, silver inlay, the kind of gun a rich man's daughter might carry. "Well," I said, "which part of their story was true?" Li Wei looked at me for a long moment, then carefully set the pistol on the kitchen table between us like she was laying down cards in a poker game. "All of it," she said simply. "And none of it. That's not an answer. My name is Li Wei Chen. My father is richest merchant in Chinatown. I was supposed to marry Zhang Wei Lu 2 weeks ago." She sat down heavily, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked like what she was. A scared young woman far from home. "But they not tell you about Zhang Wei Lu." I pulled out the other chair, keeping the rifle within reach. "So, tell me." "He is animal. Beats his first wife until she lose 3 babies, beats his concubines, beats servants." Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "My father, he know this. He not care. Zhang Wei Lu pay good price, and that all that matter to Chen Wei Ming. So you ran." I tried to talk to my father first. Beg him. Tell him I rather die than marry such man. She laughed bitterly. He say dying not option, family honor more important than one daughter's happiness. I was starting to understand, but something still didn't add up. The gold, Li Wei. $50,000 doesn't just walk out of Chinatown. She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she pulled something from her dress, a small, leather-bound book filled with columns of numbers in both Chinese and English. "My father's business ledger," she said. "Zhang Wei Lu, he not just husband, he is partner. They bring girls from China. Promise them work in America. Instead," she swallowed hard, "they sell them. White slavery. My dowry, it come from blood money." Yet the pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. "You stole their profits. I steal their shame." Her eyes blazed with fury I hadn't seen before. "Every coin in that pouch belonged to girl who suffer, girl who die. I take what belonged to dead, and I use it to disappear. But you didn't disappear, you married me. Immigration officer, he catch me at train station. Say I have no papers, no husband, no right to be in America. Give me choice, marry American citizen or go back to China." She met my eyes. "Back to China mean back to Zhang Wei Lu, back to my father, back to—" She shuddered. "I choose you because you have honest face. But I not know if honest face mean honest heart." Outside, I could hear the horses moving through the timber. The Tong men were positioning themselves, making sure we couldn't run. "And now," I asked, "now they find me. And you married to woman who steal from most dangerous men in California." She picked up the pistol again, checking the chambers with practiced ease. "I am sorry, Thomas McKenna. I think I bring death to your door." "Maybe, but that's not your choice anymore." I stood and grabbed a box of ammunition from the shelf. "You're my wife now. For better or worse, remember? And I'll be damned if I let a bunch of thugs terrorize a woman on my land." She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You not understand. These men, they kill for money. For them is just business. And for me, it's personal." I loaded my rifle and checked my Colt. "Besides, you said it yourself, that gold belongs to the dead. Maybe it's time the dead got some justice." Li Wei stood slowly, the pistol steady in her hands. "You will fight? For woman you not even know?" "I'm getting to know you." I moved to the window and peered through the curtains. I could see movement in the trees, at least 3 men, probably more. And what I see is someone who risked everything to do what was right. That's worth fighting for. For the first time since I'd met her, Li Wei smiled. It transformed her face completely, and I caught a glimpse of the woman she might have been if the world had been kinder. In China we have saying, she said, when the small fish swims with shark, either shark eat fish, or fish become shark. She moved to the opposite window, taking position like someone who'd done this before. Tell me, Thomas McKenna, you ready to become shark? The sound of splintering wood cut through the air. They were breaking down the barn door, but what they'd find there would only be an empty hole and fresh dirt. The real gold was hidden somewhere else entirely. Somewhere Li Wei had moved it while I was talking to the riders. She'd been planning, thinking 3 steps ahead while I was still trying to understand the game. They're in the barn, I whispered. Good. Let them dig. Li Wei's voice was cold as winter steel. When they realize gold not there, they get angry. Angry men make mistakes. A shout erupted from the barn, rage and frustration that echoed across the valley. They'd found the empty hiding place. The scarred man's voice carried clearly in the still air. Tear this place apart. Find that gold. Li Wei looked at me across the small cabin, and I saw something in her eyes that made my blood sing. Not fear, not desperation. Pure, deadly calculation. Now we see, she said quietly, if honest face truly have warrior heart. The first shot shattered the cabin's front window, sending glass cascading across the floor like deadly rain. Li Wei didn't flinch. She returned fire immediately, her small pistol barking twice in rapid succession. Through the smoke, I heard a man scream. One down, she said calmly, reloading with movements so smooth they were almost beautiful to watch. Where the hell did you learn to shoot like that? I asked, pumping a round into my rifle. My father. He have many enemies in Chinatown. All his children learn to protect themselves. She moved to a different window, keeping low. But Zhang Wei Lu, he want wife who cannot fight back. He not know I practice every day since I was 12. The cabin erupted in gunfire from 3 directions. They'd spread out, trying to pin us down while one of them flanked around back. Professional tactics. These weren't just hired thugs. They were soldiers. Thomas, Li Wei's voice cut through the chaos. Back window. I spun around to see the thick-set man climbing through the rear window, a massive Bowie knife in his teeth, murder in his eyes. My rifle caught him center mass and sent him tumbling backward into my wife's vegetable garden. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd finally grown something worthwhile in that patch of dirt. 2 down, I called out. No! Li Wei's voice was grim. More coming. I see 6 horses in trees. 6, Christ. We were outnumbered 3-1, trapped in a cabin with limited ammunition and nowhere to run. That's when Li Wei did something that stopped my heart. She stood up, walked calmly to the front door, and opened it wide. Chen Wei Ming, she called out in Chinese, then repeated in English for my benefit. I know you there, father. Come out and face your daughter. The shooting stopped. In the sudden silence, I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. A voice answered from the tree line, older, cultured, speaking English with barely a trace of accent. Li Wei, my foolish, ungrateful daughter, you have caused me great shame. I have caused you nothing, father, but you... Her voice carried across the valley like a blade. You sold your daughter to a monster, for money, for business connections. What shame is greater than that? A figure emerged from the trees. Tall for a Chinese man, impeccably dressed despite the rough country, with silver-streaked hair and eyes like black ice. Even at a distance I could see the family resemblance, the same proud bearing, the same steel spine. Return the money, Li Wei. Come home. Zhang Wei Lu is willing to forgive your temporary madness. Li Wei laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. Forgive? What is he to forgive? That I would not let him beat me on our wedding night? That I would not smile while he broke my bones? A wife's duty. A wife's duty is to her husband, yes, but I am not his wife. I am married to this man. She stepped closer to me, her hand finding mine. The touch sent electricity up my arm. Thomas McKenna is my husband now. American husband. American law. Chen Wei Ming's face darkened. American law means nothing to the Tong, daughter. You know this. Maybe not, but it means something to him. She squeezed my hand. And he means something to me. The words hit me like a physical blow. In all of this, the deception, the danger, the violence, I hadn't considered that she might actually care what happened to me. Hell, I hadn't admitted to myself that I was starting to care what happened to her. Touching, Chen Wei-ming said. But meaningless. You will return the gold and come home, or you will die here with your husband. He spat the last word like poison. No, father. Li Wei's voice was steady as bedrock. There is third choice. She reached into her dress and pulled out the leather ledger, holding it high where everyone could see. I offer trade, she called out. The gold, for this book. Chen Wei-ming went completely still. Even from 50 yards away, I could see the color drain from his face. You don't know what you're holding, daughter. Oh, but I do. Li Wei's smile was sharp as a razor. Names, dates, payments, ship manifests. Every girl you and Zhang Wei-lu brought from China, every girl you sold, every official you bribed to look away. She opened the book and began reading in a voice that carried clearly in the mountain air. May 15th, 1886. Ship Golden Dragon. 12 girls, ages 14 to 20, sold to... Enough! Chen Wei-ming's composure cracked completely. You have no idea what you're playing with. Playing! Li Wei's voice turned deadly. You think this is game to me? These were real girls, father, with names, with families, with dreams. She flipped through more pages. Here, Zhang Mei Lin, 16 years old, died 3 months after arrival, cause of death listed as accident. But I remember her. She fight back so they make example. Now I understood. This wasn't just about escaping an arranged marriage. This was about justice for girls who had no voice, no power, no hope. The gold stays buried, Li Wei continued. It buy headstones for nameless graves. But this book, she held it higher. This book, go to authorities, to newspapers, to anyone who will listen. Unless, Chen Wei-ming asked, though he already knew, unless you walk away, you, Zhang Wei-lu, all of you, you leave us alone, you never come back, and book stays buried with the gold. And for a long moment nobody moved. The wind stirred the pines, and somewhere in the distance a hawk cried. Then Chen Wei-ming pulled a gun, a beautiful engraved revolver that probably cost more than my ranch. I am sorry, daughter, he said, but I cannot let you destroy everything I have built. The shot that followed didn't come from his gun. Li Wei's pistol smoked in the afternoon sun as Chen Wei-ming crumpled to his knees, clutching his shoulder. Her shot had been perfect, disabling, not killing. Even facing her own father, she'd shown mercy. I'm not sure I would have. Drop your weapons! The voice boomed across the valley, and suddenly the tree line exploded with movement. Men in dark blue uniforms emerged from cover, rifles trained on the remaining Tong gunmen. U.S. Marshals, at least a dozen of them. The lead marshal, a grizzled man with sergeant stripes and eyes like granite, rode into the clearing with his weapon, trained on Chen Wei-ming. Chen Wei-ming, you're under arrest for violation of the Chinese Exclusion Act, human trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder. I stared at Li Wei in amazement. You sent word to the law? She shook her head, pressing her back against the cabin wall as marshals swarmed the area, disarming and shackling the surviving Tong members. No, but someone did. That would be me. The voice came from behind us, and I spun around to see a woman in travel-stained clothes, climbing down from a horse I hadn't heard approach. Asian features, but dressed like an American, and carrying herself with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. Zhang Mei Lin, Li Wei whispered, and I heard something break in her voice. But you died. The book said you died. The woman smiled grimly. Death was easier to fake than escape. I've been working with the marshals for 2 years, building a case against the trafficking rings. She gestured toward Chen Wei-ming, who was being bandaged and shackled simultaneously. Your father and Zhang Wei-lu have been selling girls for 6 years. We needed evidence that would stand up in court. The ledger, I said, understanding flooding through me. Exactly. Li Wei's theft gave us the missing piece. Mei Lin looked at my wife with something approaching reverence. When you ran, you didn't just save yourself. You saved every girl who would have come after. Li Wei sank onto the cabin steps, the weight of everything finally hitting her. The gold belongs to the victims, Marshal Grant said, approaching with official papers in his hand. Every cent will go toward repatriation efforts and compensation for families. As for you, Mrs. McKenna, he tipped his hat, the government of the United States thanks you for your service. Chen Wei-ming, pale with pain and rage, spat something in Chinese. Li Wei replied in the same language, her voice cold as mountain snow. Then she switched to English. He says I have dishonored the family name, she translated. I told him the Chen name was dishonored the first time he sold a child. What happens now? I asked Marshal Grant. Now? Chen Wei-ming and his associates face federal charges. The trafficking ring gets shut down permanently. Zheng Huilu is already in custody in San Francisco. He looked between Li Wei and me. And you two get to decide what kind of life you want to build together. After the marshals left with their prisoners, after Mei Lin rode away to testify at more trials, after the sun began to set behind the Sierra Nevada, Li Wei and I sat on the porch steps of our bullet-riddled cabin. So, I said finally, what do we do now? She was quiet for a long time, watching the last light fade from the sky. Thomas McKenna, do you regret marrying stranger who bring violence to your peaceful life? I thought about it, really thought about it. 3 days ago, I'd been a broke rancher facing bankruptcy, alone on a failing spread with nothing but debt and empty land. Now I was married to a woman who'd stolen from the Chinese mafia, fought a gun battle against professional killers, and helped bring down a trafficking ring that had destroyed countless lives. Regret? I laughed, surprising myself. Li Wei. 3 days ago, the biggest excitement in my life was wondering if my chickens would lay enough eggs for breakfast. Now I'm married to the bravest woman I've ever met. I've got enough reward money coming to save the ranch, and I helped put some genuinely evil men behind bars. I looked at her sideways. Besides, you make a hell of a partner in a gunfight. She smiled. That real smile that transformed her whole face, and you make good husband for desperate woman with dangerous secrets. Speaking of secrets, I nudged her shoulder. Any more surprises I should know about? Hidden fortunes, vengeful relatives, secret skills I haven't discovered yet? Well, she pretended to think seriously. I am very good cook, much better than salt pork and beans. Now that, I said, pulling her close, sounds like the best secret of all. As the stars came out over our patched-up cabin and our bullet-riddled barn, I realized something important. I'd married Li Wei Chen to save her from deportation. But somehow, in the process, she'd saved me from something far worse, a life without purpose, without passion, without someone worth fighting for. The mountain wind carried the scent of pine and possibility, and for the first time in years, I looked forward to tomorrow. After all, we had a ranch to rebuild, a life to build together, and knowing Li Wei, probably a few more adventures ahead of us. I wouldn't have it any other way.